They called her worthless. They laughed when she walked in. They pushed her out of the reunion like she never even existed. But then, the doors swung open. And the most powerful man in the city stepped in. Not for revenge, but to remind the world of one thing. Never underestimate a woman, just because she chose silence. There are moments in life you never want to relive, and Grace Miller's high school reunion was exactly one of them. And yet, by some cruel twist of fate, there she was, standing in the chandelier-lit ballroom of the Hilton in Boston, where every youthful memory came flooding back, and stabbed her heart like velvet-covered blades. Grace, a simple woman with loosely braided chestnut hair, walked in wearing a plain black dress, elegant but unassuming. Her eyes, deep brown like soil after rain, held a calm, quiet wisdom. In her early 40s, she didn't need diamonds to shine. She was the light. But no one in that room saw it. To them, Grace was still that awkward girl. The one who couldn't hold a knife properly in home EC class. The one who trembled during her Shakespeare presentation. She was the embodiment of failure in their minds. And that made them feel bigger, better. In a room sparkling with champagne glasses and tailored suits, the past didn't return in a soft, nostalgic glow. It came like a hurricane named Chad Dawson, her smug ex, who thought he was the hometown Brad Pitt. He leaned against the bar, beer in hand, not champagne, his hair still slicked back like he thought he invented charm. "Well, look who crawled out from under the rubble," he said loud enough for heads to turn. Grace Miller, huh? Still useless? Laughter erupted like popcorn in a microwave. Grace offered a soft smile, a smile stitched from thin thread and thick patience. "Hey, Chad," she said gently, trying to preserve a sense of grace, as if decency still had a place in this room full of sharp tongues. But Chad didn't care for manners. He stepped closer, beer breath hot and bitter, and jabbed a finger toward her face. "You're still a waste of space. That dress looks like something off the clearance rack." He sneered, grabbed a glass of water from the table, and dumped it over Grace's head. The ice-cold water streamed down her braid, dripping onto her face. Like the past had been frozen, and poured all over her present. "Now you look as pathetic as you are," he growled, beaming like a kid who just knocked over a sandcastle. Tiffany Blake, former cheer captain, platinum hair, stuffed into a red dress tighter than a sausage casing, cheered like it was the 4th of July. Bullseye. Grace flinched, not from the cold, but from the sheer cruelty coming from someone she once split her lunch with in 10th grade. But she didn't retaliate. She simply wiped her cheek, a small gesture that became a silent shield against their venom. Grace hadn't come here to win. She wasn't wearing a $1,000 gown. She wasn't flaunting a billionaire's wife badge. She had come because of a sweet message from an old friend, Laura, who promised, "It'll be fun." Laura had been wrong. So wrong. When Tiffany flicked Grace's braid like a teenager in a bad high school drama. Mark, the former jock turned car salesman, added his rusty voice to the mix. "Bet she's still living in that old trailer. Probably here for the free food." And once again, they laughed. A laughter that had no soul, no grace, just cruelty. Grace's cheeks burned, not with shame, but with the realization. These people had never truly grown up. Tiffany kept going. She snatched Grace's purse like she was playing some twisted game of, who's the worst human here? And she was clearly winning. "What's in here?" "Coupons," she cackled, tossing items across the floor like a cheap magician at a kid's party. Mark kicked the purse across the room and shouted, "Empty. Poor girl probably starves herself." Laughter exploded like fireworks gone wrong. Grace knelt down, picking up her things. Her phone, her keys, fragments of her dignity. Hands trembling, but never breaking. She whispered to herself. "I'm going to write this. Every word. Every face. I will not forget." In that moment of chaos, as the shouting echoed off the walls like tortured ghosts from high school past, Grace Miller, soaked, her dress clinging, braid tangled, still stood tall. They, Chad, Tiffany, Mark, Tommy, and the rest of the giggling crowd, sang in unison like a chorus of cruelty. Their insults didn't just attack her appearance, they sliced through memory, stabbing the image of a girl with worn shoes and a paper lunch sack. "She's a stain on this reunion," Chad shouted, like he was judge and jury in a courtroom of phonies. Grace leaned against the nearest table, pain from Tommy's shove running down her spine like an electric shock. But instead of collapsing, she stood back up, her frame slight and trembling, but her eyes, her eyes were blazing. They burned with something no one else in that room possessed, the calm fire of a woman who'd walked through hell and no longer needed anyone's permission to exist. Tiffany, with a smile as sweet and poisonous as sugar laced with venom, stepped forward and accidentally flung her cocktail onto Grace's dress. "Oh dear, my bad," she sang mockingly, then added with a wink, "Honestly, it looks less boring when it's wet." Laughter cracked like New Year's fireworks, not out of joy, but from souls that had clearly never matured. Mark threw a napkin at Grace's face as if tossing trash onto a rusty old trailer. "Clean it up, garbage. Don't stink up the room." Chad walked over, his voice soaked in beer and arrogance. "You're embarrassing yourself, Grace. Nobody wants you here. The door's right there. Use it." He waved dramatically like some off-brand king addressing his court. The crowd bellowed in unison, "Get out," like they were exorcising a witch from a county fair. Grace walked slowly toward the door. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with something too painful for words. "I'll go, if that's what you all want." Tiffany gave her a shove, not hard, but enough to make her stumble and drop her purse. Mark, never missing a chance to strike, threw another handful of napkins at her. A wet slap of spite. "Clean up your mess, loser." Chad sneered, grabbed Grace's braid, and yanked it so hard she gasped. "Get out, you pathetic failure. And don't come back." Tommy kicked her flats as she neared the door, almost tripping her. Phones flew up into the air, recording like vultures circling fresh roadkill. "Bye, Grace," someone shouted with a laugh. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." And then, the double doors slammed shut. The laughter. The shouting. The phones. All muffled behind her. Grace stood alone in the cold hallway. Her dress clung to her skin, her braid a mess from the storm behind her. But in her eyes, there was still fire. Not the fire of rage, but the fire of someone who had survived the darkest night, and no longer feared the dark. She pulled out her phone, her wet fingers steady. "Grace, hey, the reunion's a disaster. They kicked me out." Message sent. Within 5 seconds, the screen lit up. "Daniel, where are you?" "Grace, outside the Hilton. I'm fine. Just a little shaken." The next message came in all caps, like a vow carved in steel. "Daniel, whatever they did, I'm doing double." Grace exhaled, not out of exhaustion, but with the quiet knowing that she had just unleashed a storm. Not just any storm. A storm named Daniel Whitmore, the only man in her life who could walk into a room full of poison and turn it all to ash. She didn't want drama. But Daniel? Oh, Daniel was drama itself. The double doors slowly swung open, as if even they knew this moment belonged to someone extraordinary. And then, stepping through them, was Grace Miller. Soaked from head to toe, her black dress clinging to her like a love letter blurred by tears. But she didn't crumble. She walked in like a quiet sonata amidst a chaotic symphony. No one laughed. No one sneered. The packed room suddenly felt airless, as if someone had sucked all the oxygen from the space. Grace's eyes, wet but not weak, scanned each face. And like an invisible wind, made every person who once screamed, "Get out," feel a sudden chill down their spine. And then Daniel Whitmore appeared. Not entered. Appeared. As if the heavens cracked open to send a god walking among mortals. Hair slicked back, standing nearly 6 feet 5 inches, his charcoal gray suit tailored to perfection. The chandelier's light cast a subtle halo around his shoulders. He didn't walk, he advanced, every stride declaring, "I didn't come to join this party. I came to end this farce." Every gaze, once smug, dismissive, or indifferent, now locked on him like students caught cheating during finals. Daniel Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Group. The man who turned a dingy garage into a global tech empire. The man whose single phone call could shake an entire industry. Now stood before his wife, lifting her chin with hands gentler than any apology ever spoken in that room. "You okay, sweetheart?" His voice deep, soft, but ringing like a cathedral bell in her chest. Grace nodded slightly, lips trembling but eyes unwavering. "Yeah. I'm okay." Daniel kissed her forehead, not a fiery kiss, but a quiet vow that said, "No one gets to hurt you, without going through me." Then he turned to the crowd, eyes sharp enough to slice glass. "Which one of you is Chad?" Chad, the man who once thought he was the sun around which others orbited, now looked like a smudge on a clean page. He swallowed hard, raised his hand weakly. That's me." Daniel didn't wait. "You called my wife useless. Said she was poor. Said she was boring in bed and didn't know how to dress." Chad stammered, It was just a joke. I didn't mean." "Oh." Daniel chuckled, cold as a December wind. "Funny guy. Let's see how funny it is when I bury your career 6 feet deep." He pulled out his phone, fingers gliding like a concert pianist. "Sarah, it's me." Chad Coleman applied to Grayson. "Kill it. Blacklist him. Every department. Every partner company. Permanently." The room fell dead silent. Chad turned pale, like someone just handed him a 10-year overdue tax bill. Tiffany, in a red dress that now screamed hazard, stepped back, trying to duck Daniel's line of sight. But no one escaped that look. "You," Daniel said, turning to her. With the red dress that spilled wine and a mouth that spilled venom. Tiffany trembled. I didn't mean to." Daniel motioned to the side. "Mark. Tiffany Blake. Realtor. Revoke her license. Pull her from every state registry." Tiffany's jaw dropped. Her lower lip quivered like a leaf in a storm. Daniel wasn't done. "Mark. Tommy," he said, stepping forward like a walking fortress. "You too, tossing napkins, kicking purses. You can apply anywhere you want. But in my ecosystem, you won't even get close, not with a 10-foot pole." He slipped his phone back into his pocket and took Grace's hand. "Anyone else want to try me?" The room turned into a cemetery of reputations. Where every eye that once looked down on her now lowered in silence. Chad, barely a whisper in the wind, tried again. "Grace. I mean, we used to." Grace stared straight at him, her eyes like calm arrows piercing through pretense. "You don't get to call me that anymore." Daniel smirked. "She's Mrs. Whitmore now. The woman I just married. And the woman who just walked out of your world, forever." At the corner of the stage, Brenda the MC still held the mic, stammering like she'd just seen a UFO. Let's give a warm round of applause for Grace and Daniel." A few weak claps echoed, swallowed by the tension. No one meant it. No one dared. Daniel leaned toward his wife, whispering, "Why didn't you tell me they were this bad?" Grace gave a quiet smile, the kind only someone who's forgiven too many times knows how to give. "I didn't want drama. I figured, you could handle it." He nodded, half angry, half proud. "You're too kind. But don't worry. I'm not. He turned back to face the room. This reunion, the money. It's hers. The food? Hers. The venue, the wine, the lights, all because of her. And what did you do? You tore her apart like stray dogs over a bone. Enjoy tonight. Because it's the last taste you'll ever get. Of her generosity. Man, it was just a joke, Mark stammered, his voice dry as a throat dragged across desert sand. Daniel turned back, no raised voice, no threats. Just that look. The look of a man who's negotiated billion-dollar deals and doesn't blink under pressure. It was enough to make Mark feel like a naked rat on a Broadway stage. Well now, Daniel cut him off. You're joking, with your career. And just like that, one sentence, no more. The entire room froze. Before Mark could even process the threat, Tommy's phone buzzed. A notification lit up like a flare in a storm. Your consulting contract has been cancelled. Please contact HR to retrieve your file. Tommy's jaw dropped, as if he'd just realized he was the villain in his own final episode. Tiffany, who once flung wine like a director choreographing a meltdown, was now trembling as she scrolled her phone. Her fingers slick with sweat like she'd swum through a sea of consequences. Your real estate license is under review. Sorry, Kel. Her face twisted, no longer the proud woman in a red dress. But just someone unraveling everything she had. All because of one laugh at the wrong time. Mark and Tommy, the napkin-flipping clowns of the evening, were now hushed shadows whispering too late apologies. All their bravado, their taunts and sneers, had popped like soap bubbles in a cold bucket labeled truth. The loudest laughs now belonged to the quietest mouths. And at the center of it all stood Grace. Her soaked dress no longer a symbol of shame, but a badge of honor. Her silence, a weapon none of them ever understood, had become the undercurrent drowning every fake smile in the room. She didn't smirk. She didn't insult. She didn't need to. Grace simply took Daniel's hand, gently, but with the steadiness of someone piecing herself back together, and walked up to the stage. Brenda, the event's MC, handed her the mic with both hands, as if she were crowning royalty. A long pause. Grace stood there, calm, soaked, but eyes shining like city lights at midnight. Do you want to say something? Brenda whispered. Grace nodded, scanning the sea of faces. Those who had once laughed loudest now stared at her like students waiting for test results. I came here, she said clearly, to see old friends. Not to keep score. But you made this happen. She glanced at Chad, now a cowering version of the man he thought he was. And you scored on your own goal. She set the mic down. No further words were needed. Daniel took her hand. And together they walked off the stage, leaving the ballroom not like victors, but like people who had chosen peace, and still won. Behind the curtain of consequence. That night, long after Grace and Daniel vanished down the hallway, Chad chased after them. His smug grin replaced with a desperate, sweat-drenched grimace, like an unpaid tax notice. Grace. Please, he panted. I didn't know you were rich. I need that job at Grayson. I'm drowning in debt. Tiffany followed, her red dress now just a wine-stained wreck. We're sorry. Please don't let him ruin us. Grace looked at them, her wet hair clinging to her cheeks. But her eyes were crystal clear, like sunlight through a magnifying glass. You called me worthless. You destroyed me for fun. Now. You can beg all you want. I won't save you. Daniel stood behind her, arms crossed like a silent mountain no one dared climb. You heard the lady. Get lost. They backed away in silence, like darkness receding before the dawn. And then the storm hit. Monday. Consequences didn't knock. They kicked the damn door in like federal agents. Chad called 5 companies. All 5 turned him down the moment they heard his name. Daniel hadn't just cleared the road. He blocked every exit. Tiffany got a call from the licensing board, her real estate license suspended. Client emails went unanswered. Contracts vanished into thin air. Mark was fired from his company for reputational risk. Tommy's consulting deal vanished overnight. One night was all it took to change a life. Last attempt at mercy. Tiffany, in a final act of desperation, ambushed Grace the next day. Outside her office building. She wore sweatpants, mascara streaked down her face. No red dress. No strut. Please, Grace. I'll give up real estate. I'll do anything. Don't let him destroy my life. Grace gently removed Tiffany's hand from her arm. You dumped your drink on me. Ruined my clothes. Laughed at me when I was at my lowest. And now you're sorry. She turned and walked away. Leaving Tiffany collapsed on the sidewalk. Her pleas drowned out by the sounds of the city. Which, like Grace, had no time for hollow apologies. Silence was the most beautiful ending. The reunion's Facebook page exploded. Photos deleted. Apologies posted like last-minute fireworks. Grace never replied. She was busy. Running Silvergate Capital. A firm built on integrity. Led by a woman who'd seen more fake smiles than Wall Street has stock tips. Saturday night in the sky. The penthouse was quiet. City lights twinkled like stars that knew how to keep secrets. Daniel poured the wine. Grace wore her sweatshirt, hair up, her eyes soft like morning after the storm. You're a saint for putting up with them, he said with a smirk. Maybe, she replied, her lips curling slightly. But you're my devil. Daniel raised his glass. Always, Nat. She clinked her glass against his. Always. And those who once tore her apart had vanished like smoke. In the wind. Of a queen. Wearing a simple black dress. And then, the world kept turning. Not because of the loudest laughs. Not because of those who once stood at the center of the room. But because of one woman, soaked, humiliated, and pushed out of what should have been a beautiful memory. Who chose to walk back in. Not for revenge. But to reclaim the power of kindness, dignity, and grace. Grace didn't win with words. She won with silence. With her head held high. And with the quiet presence of someone who knows their worth isn't measured by the eyes of others. And Daniel. The man who didn't just stand behind her. But stood with her. Was living proof that true love doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs the right person, at the right time. Some stories don't need gunfire to become legends. They only need a simple black dress. A steady nod. And a hand that never lets go. If this story moved you, let us know. Please like, share, leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next meaningful story. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next chapter.